It's called the House of 1,000 Voices for a reason. Stick around to hear stories of investigating the Ferry Plantation in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Welcome to the Peep Podcast. I'm your host, Nicolle, and I'm grateful you're here. The two big ideas behind the Peep Podcast are to show that the paranormal is more normal than most people think, and to connect the science to the sci, including ESP, hauntings, and psychokinesis. In this episode, we're taking a trip down memory lane to the Ferry Plantation. But first, I want to say thank you for sticking with me through my spring break. It sounds fun, but even my trip to the beach on a cool and windy weekend was all about being productive. I wrote almost 5,000 words of my novel since the weather was not conducive to vegging out on the beach. And I'm not complaining. In fact, I really hope to be done with the novel by the end of March, but life, as always, gets in the way. And instead, I'm about 16,000 words in and have about 64,000 words left to write. If you know an author, give them a hug. I won't say writing is hard, but I will say making time to get the words on the page can be a challenge. Still, I promised I'd be back after a month-long break, and here I am. I did accomplish one thing over the break. I finally added the Peep Podcast to my YouTube channel, so Peep and Positive Headspace are there now. I also took a month-long Shorts challenge, which just means that almost every day in March I posted a 15 to 45 second short video called Sound Up for Nature. Most of the videos are from my nature walks down past the duck hole near my neighborhood, but a few are from the windy weekend at the beach. My goal for them was to provide a moment with nature for anyone who needs a mental break while doom scrolling. The experience proved rewarding enough that I'm keeping up the habit. Anytime I can walk in nature and get video, I'll post it on YouTube. One other thing I did in March, I had a chance to join a paranormal investigation of the Trivet Clinic in western North Carolina. It was my first time there, and while it's alleged to have about a dozen ghosts, I felt nothing and I got no EVP. That does not mean it's not haunted, though. It only means that there wasn't anything happening the night I was there. I've spoken with other investigators who have gotten EVP and had personal experiences in the place, so don't let my letdown deter you from visiting. Because I stayed busy through March, I don't have any interviews lined up for this podcast, so I need your help. If you've been listening a while, you know I'd love to hear your personal paranormal stories of any flavor. Ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, near-death experiences, whatever. Just go to peeppodcast.com and use the Share Your Personal Experiences button to get in touch and let me know you'd like to be on the show. I promise the process is painless and you can be as anonymous as you'd like. One last announcement before I dive into tonight's topic. If you're local to the Triangle area of North Carolina, come see me and other local authors and makers at 5 Points Fest on Saturday, April 25th, from noon to 4 in Youngsville. It's a great annual outdoor market. I attended as a shopper last year and found lots of cool things and met even cooler people, which is why I'm participating as a vendor this year. And speaking of books, we can now get back to tonight's topic. Another chapter from Please Don't Call Me Psychic, Stories from My Paranormal Life. This one is about Ferry Plantation, a historic location in Virginia Beach, Virginia that my team and I investigated several times. In fact, Ferry was my first investigation with the team. and you'll hear all about it in this excerpt. Chapter 3, Inspire Story, The Ferry Plantation. Geographical location, Virginia Beach, Virginia. Location type, historic site. Claims of activity, disembodied voices. Full body apparition of Henry in the old kitchen area. EVP from many different spirits. Ghost cat. Presence of Sally in her room. Ghosts on the grounds of 3 enslaved people who were hung on a tree in the yard. Chains hanging near a window clanging of their own volition. Lesson learned. The House of 1,000 Voices is aptly named. EVP available online? Yes. It has been called the House of 1,000 Voices for good reason. One of the most famously haunted public places in Virginia Beach, the Ferry Plantation has never failed to yield electronic voice phenomena, or EVP. Investigators have captured male and female and even feline voices on digital recorders. Some have been one-syllable sounds that could be heard as yes or no, and others have been lengthy phrases such as our favorite, quote, "that flea-bagged whore," unquote. While it is a little more PG-13 than we like to present at our library talks, it always results in gasps and giggles between the clarity and the shock factor. The Ferry Plantation will always have a special place in my memory because it was my first investigation with Inspire, and the one where I proved to the group, George in particular, that I really did have a knack for picking up on spirits. On my first trip to the historic landmark, George had given me a little information about the place. It dated back centuries, it used to be the site of a ferry landing, and it was once used as a jail and courthouse. That was really all I needed to know. Any more detail, and I feared it would taint my impression of the energy there. When we arrived, we were greeted by a very warm and friendly woman named Belinda, who was there to be our sitter for the night. George asked her not to say too much about the activity in the house until I had a chance to try a cold walkthrough and get my bearings. She told me to feel free to look around and ask questions if I had any. I didn't feel much of anything unusual on the first floor, so I headed upstairs. In one bedroom, I immediately felt that familiar sensation in the middle of my spine, letting me know that there was a presence. It was strong and persistent. Belinda had followed me upstairs, and I turned to her and said, "There is something very strong in this room." It wasn't scary, but it wanted me to know it was there. Belinda just smiled and followed me through the rest of the house. There were a few moments when I felt some different sensations, but that one really stood out. When we rejoined George downstairs, he asked what I thought. I told him the house was beautiful and obviously full of old things, and that could have affected some of what I felt. But there was one room that really stood out. Belinda eagerly told him that I had picked up on Sally, who had been quite active all day up there. I think that impressed George a little, and Belinda's validation made me happy. The Ferry Plantation is one of those locations that we visited often, and I hate to admit it, but many of those visits run together in my memory. I'm afraid this particular chapter may come across as a bit more rambling in the mode of one time at the ferry. We often took our meetup group there. We probably had a few too many people with us, but everyone was so excited for an opportunity in the House of 1,000 Voices that it was hard to say no. Among the group were artists, school teachers, a professed curious skeptic, a few people who claimed mediumistic tendencies, and just some who were generally curious about how Inspire conducted investigations. When we had a large group, we would split up into 2 smaller groups, and each would take the opposite side of the house. For example, one would take the downstairs far right room while the other went to the top floor far left room. we were attempting to alleviate as much potential interference from each other as possible. Two-way radios were our method of communication, and we alerted each other to any sounds we heard in other rooms in an effort to make sure they weren't being created by the other group. It was a little complicated, but it worked well enough. So what happened on our many trips to the Ferry Plantation? Cat called. A group I was leading was sitting in the dining room on the first floor. We were spaced apart, sitting around the large table with a couple of people standing in opposite corners. One lady who was sitting across the table from me said she felt something brush against her leg. A few seconds later, another lady a few seats down said, "I just felt it too." By the end of our 15-minute EVP session, several had experienced the sensation of an animal brushing by them. During a snack break immediately afterward, one of those ladies decided to listen to her audio recording of that session. Excitement spread quickly as she announced she had captured a cat's meow. We listened to it and heard it for ourselves. The ghost cat had paid us a visit. Phantom food poisoning. During one EVP session, we were in the upstairs bedroom known as Sally's or Stella's room. I was standing in the middle of the room, focusing on the darkness, while others asked questions when a sharp pain started in my stomach. My first thought was, what did I eat to cause this? Then I took a deep breath and let it go, realizing it wasn't my own pain. As an empath, I can feel other people's physical ailments. I interrupted the session to announce that I had a sharp pain in my stomach, but it wasn't mine, and asked if anyone else had a similar sensation. That's when one of the guys who studied the history of the house announced what Sally was said to have died from: mistakenly eating poisonous mushrooms. Once I acknowledged the feeling and how horrible her death must have been, the pain was gone. Potentially unexplained sounds. Often groups would be in one room and hear sounds coming from adjacent rooms or hallways. For example, one night we were in a room next to the gift shop when we heard the sound of something rolling across the floor inside it. We all asked each other what that sound was and confirmed the direction from which it came. When we went into the gift shop for our next EVP session, we saw nothing out of place. During that session, one of our group members found a small marble-sized ball and rolled it across the floor. The sound it made seemed like an exact match to what we heard coming from a then empty room. Clicks and taps. Another regular occurrence during our ferry investigations was random sounds claimed by no one in the group. As a general rule, any noise created by an investigator has to be tagged by the person, so we know it isn't paranormal when we go back and listen to the recordings. When reviewing audio, you'll hear people announce, "That was me," and "I shifted my weight," and "My stomach just growled." It's amazing how much noise people can make when they're trying to be quiet. Sometimes the sounds aren't claimed. I have many recordings of various clicks and taps followed by us questioning each other. "Did you hear that? It wasn't me. I thought it was you." And so on. Our next step would be to try to duplicate the sound by tapping on various surfaces in the room, but to no avail. The sounds may have been totally mundane, but then again, maybe they weren't.
Well, what I heard on the stairs was not ticking. It was like a click, click. Like that? That was funny. Do it again.
Thoughts in regards to one that you have convicted?
Did you hear that?
One that wasn't you?
No.
A little tap.
It was like a, yeah.
Full phrases and single syllables. The EVP we recorded at the Ferry Plantation include the aforementioned "that flea-bagged whore," which seemed to be an answer to a question asked by an investigator as to how many children lived in the house. If it was an answer, the male voice certainly didn't have much respect for the lady of the house. The EVPs I personally captured are one-syllable whispers that sound like no and what. It's interesting when you record a male voice seemingly responding to a question asked in a room supposedly haunted by a male spirit. For example, in Henry's room, which is on the 3rd floor of the house over the old kitchen, I captured a male voice whispering, "What?" In the cat room, we caught a meow. In Sally's room, we caught a female saying, "No." The recording seemed to match the spirits said to haunt each part of the house.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started, and then we'll share stories after this, and take a break and have a snack, whatever. Do you enjoy having company?
I will always have a deep appreciation for the Ferry Plantation, and I encourage other investigative groups to go. The cost of investigating overnight helps keep the place running, and it's a small price to pay for a chance to experience the haunted side of a wonderfully historic location. Thank you for listening. If you're interested in buying Please Don't Call Me Psychic, it's available on Amazon. I'll have a link in the show notes. If you want to share your own personal paranormal experiences of any type, use the Share Your Personal Experience button and fill out the form at peeppodcast.com to get in touch. You can be as anonymous as you'd like. You can let your paranormal freak flag fly and share your name. Either way, I'm happy to hear from you. Sharing our stories helps people realize that the paranormal is much more normal than they think. That's PEEP podcast.com. Remember, that stands for People Experiencing Everyday Paranormal. While you're there, subscribe to my newsletter to keep up with the podcast and all my creative and energetic endeavors. I usually only email it once a month unless I have a special event you should know about. You'll receive briefs on recent episodes, behind-the-scenes moments, information on upcoming appearances, plus some occasional fun extras. If you enjoy the podcast, please give it some rating love on your favorite podcast app. Share it with friends and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Ratings, reviews, and shares help platforms like Apple Podcast and Spotify know it's worthy of surfacing to new listeners. And as we build our audience, we have more chances to hear their paranormal stories. A huge thank you to everyone who has given the show some love. You're helping it grow. No matter how you support the show, listening, telling others about it, or any other way, I absolutely appreciate your being here. Thanks again for listening. Stay safe and be well.